Welcome to the Cold Case Christianity broadcast, the only Christian case-making program hosted by a cold case homicide detective. J. Warner Wallace has been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Court TV, and Dateline. For more information about Jim's work and the case for Christianity, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. Now, here's your host, J. Warner Wallace.
Thanks for joining us at Cold Case Christianity. I'm J. Warner Wallace. We have been going through, over the last several weeks, my gosh, I think we're maybe in episode 15, 16, 17, something like that, of all the quick shot responses that we hope will help you overcome objections that you encounter in conversations. And we call these quick shots because we believe these are relatively brief, hopefully rhetorically powerful responses, and they're meant to be quick. And what that means is that there's always going to be a more comprehensive way to answer an objection that we're going to give you in these quick shots. But we are in a culture in which those longer answers don't typically get listened to. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but as a content creator, we position our content on different platforms. And we'll put them on YouTube, videos on YouTube. Well, the success of videos posted on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, is really measured by how long people will watch the video. So if you had a video you put on there, thought this is the most persuasive argument, and it's 15 minutes. That's pretty brief, actually. Let's say you had a talk that you gave someplace and you recorded it, and the talk was a 40-minute talk. Well, what are the odds somebody will watch the whole 40 minutes? Well, maybe 20 years ago, the odds were probably much better. But now, given all the competition in this noisy world online, the number of people who would watch that video beyond the first 60 seconds has dropped dramatically. It's crazy. We are measuring. We feel successful if you post a 3-minute video and someone watches the whole thing, people are going, woohoo, he's got to be good. Why? Because we know attention spans are shrinking dramatically every day, and that people don't want to give you the 3 minutes. Look, if I can't say something compelling in the first 60 seconds, click, next video. This is probably true, and it's going to become true in our conversations. I don't know. I have a partner who I can tell when we're talking to a witness, and I've known this for years, is that if a few minutes in, if the witness is starting to rabbit trail, I can look over and I can see from the expression on my partner's face that he's present, but he's not listening anymore. And I don't think the witness knows, or even the suspect, if we're interviewing a suspect, but I know because I know my partner really well. We worked together for 10 years, side by side, 3 feet apart, at a desk or in a patrol car. I know this guy. And I know when he's no longer listening, okay? Even if it's me talking to him, I can see it. Well, I think we're going to discover this in conversation, that we're going to have to learn, and I'm curious to see where we will be as a species in 100 years in terms of our communication. I'll bet you we're going to be much more rhetorically powerful because we're going to know that before I couldn't unwrap this idea over the course of 4 minutes because I don't have 4 minutes anymore. If I'm going to unwrap this idea, I better be able to do this in 30 seconds because that's all the time people are going to give you because our attention spans are being shortened repeatedly by social media and how we use social media and how that social media context is incredibly crowded. It used to be in a room with somebody you're talking to. It was just you and them. But if they've got a phone now in their pocket, it's you and them and billions of other people who are competing for their attention in their wallet, in their pocket rather, in that phone. So it's time for us to become as rhetorically powerful as we can become. So I realized that at some point, although I might have written about these topics and taken 500 words to do so, no one's going to give you 500 words. Now you got to figure out how to do that in 100 words. And they better be powerful words. So I get it. Everything is shortened. Everything has to be much briefer, much more powerful. We try to do that in these quick shots, and we posted them all at our website. So we have a section on the writing section at Cold Case Christianity. But more importantly, we've put these in the first position on our phone app, and we update these regularly. And we do that because we believe, and by the way, you can go to the tab there on the website and open it for the phone app, and you can download it for both Android platform and for iPhone. And the whole point here is for you to take those and be able to use them in the context of real conversations. You know, somebody says something and you got a chance to step away from the conversation for a few minutes and just, kind of look at your phone and see what is the one paragraph answer to that objection. That's the kind of stuff we're looking to do online in our phone app. So download the phone app and we'll hopefully help you answer these objections. This week, I want to answer a specific objection. Here it is on your screen. It's simply this. You know, you don't need God to know what is morally true. Come on. Moral truths are simply a matter of personal opinion. And there's lots of people who disagree about what is morally true. That just demonstrates that moral truths are a matter of personal opinion. I mean, even within Christianity, I'm sure there are lots of disagreements about what is morally called for by God, interpretations of what God says. All of these just come down to personal opinions. That's kind of the claim I hear. And by the way, that claim is popular in a culture, especially amongst younger people. If you're a millennial or you're a Gen Z, that is a far more, because I think we are becoming much more pluralistic and much more offended by any claim that seems to be exclusive. How arrogant is that? I want to be inclusive, not exclusive. Everyone's got an opinion. I'm a respecter of people. And that old way of thinking where you think you know everything and there's only one way to interpret things, that's like the dinosaurs, folks. We are an inclusive culture now. And you can see why it would be more popular then to reject the idea that there are objective, transcendent, moral truths. That instead all we have are personal, subjective opinions, and you ought to respect mine. That's what's called tolerance. Do you see how this would be a powerful objection and why we'd be inclined to go in this direction? Okay, I want to give you 3 ways to respond to that I hope will help you at least get people to let go of that notion. Now, that does not mean that they are then going to necessarily gravitate towards God as the best explanation of objection. What we're trying to do is to help people take baby steps. And the first baby step would be to relinquish their notion that all moral truth claims are simply personal. You may not think it's okay to sleep with your girlfriend, but somebody else does. Hey, that's them. Nothing bad comes of it. Leave them alone. We want to be able to help them to at least know that moral truths are objective. They're not a matter of your personal choice. So let's just give you the first response I might offer if someone was to claim something like this. I'll put it on your screen again. I'm going to probably add words to this because I want you to see how you're going to have to contextualize any response you give to anyone. You cannot simply think that my set of 100 words will work for you. You're going to have to kind of modify this based on your audience. But here are the words we will at least begin with as we offer a response. Here they are. Okay, so you're saying basically, if I'm hearing you right, that moral truths are simply a matter of personal opinion. Okay, that's a claim, right? You just made a claim. And that claim you happen to make is about moral truth, right? The claim that moral truths are simply a matter of personal opinion is a moral truth. Is your claim simply a matter of personal opinion? That claim you just made? Because if that's the case, I can reject it, right? Because I may not agree with you. Can I just reject it if I don't agree with you? I mean, why should I agree with anyone who holds a different view than my own, including the view you just gave me, which might be different than my own? If moral truths are simply personal opinions, then all moral views are equally justified and valid, right? Even if someone believes that it's okay to harm people with whom he or she disagrees, even if I believe it's okay to harm somebody who thinks that all moral truths are simply a matter of personal opinion, if they are, then that view that I could punch you now because you made that claim, it has to be morally appropriate, right? Because that's where it's grounded. All moral truths come back to my personal opinion. Can you see why that approach to moral truth might even be dangerous? Now, sometimes we want to supersize something, right? Make it extreme because we're trying to at least help people see that the nature of the claim is ludicrous or is troublesome or is problematic. We want them to see that. So we might supersize the claim, turn it into a violent act like we just did, in order to help them to see that that's actually not a valuable way, not a valuable notion. It's a notion that might even be dangerous. And what we're doing there is trying to provide an example that might illustrate that fact for people. Remember, any claim about morality is itself a moral claim. And the claim that morality is entirely subjective, personal, is a claim. And if it's just personal, I can reject that, right? It sounds like they're making an overarching objective truth claim that all moral claims are subjective. But if all moral claims are subjective, then this claim they just made is also subjective. It cannot be overarching. It doesn't have to apply to me. Do you see the problem? It's what's called a self-refuting claim. It refutes itself. It can't even stand up under its own rules that it just proposed. So that's the first thing we want to do, is help people see the fallacy there. Now, I'm going to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to give you a couple of other ways to answer this objection, and an important objection in light of the culture we live in today. We'll take that break, and we'll come back and give you response number 2. I have a good friend in college. He was a professor who challenged him and didn't think Christianity was true. And do you know how he challenged him? This is pretty simple. He said, just do me a favor. Go read your 4 Gospels, and you tell me if this is true. And so my friend, for the first time, really sat down and compared the Passion Week in all 4 Gospels, and he saw that they are not written exactly the same. Big deal out of all the differences between each. Trust, if the witnesses won't agree, then you can't trust it, right? Wrong. I was looking at the Gospels for the first time. And the one thing that didn't shake me was that they don't match. They're not the same. They're not word for word. As a matter of fact, sometimes they're angels. They're different, right? They're all kind of different. Are they lying to you? Well, that never bothered me, because by the time I started reading the Gospels, I was already investigating cases. And I was already talking to eyewitnesses. And I'm here to tell you a little secret. You ready? Witnesses never agree. Ever. I've never had a case in which 2, 3, 4 witnesses ever agree. They don't. And I know as I'm taking these statements from these witnesses that I'm thinking to myself, oh, the defense attorney's going to have just make a lot out of this big deal that they don't agree. But this is the nature of reliable eyewitness testimony. Do you realize when I get called out on a murder scene, I only have one request of the dispatcher. They'll call me in the middle of the night. Okay, you got to go to the corner of this, and there's going to be an officer there waiting. I'll always say, okay, so there's an officer there? Yes. Are there witnesses there? Yes. Separate the eyewitnesses. That's the only request I make on a call out. Separate the eyewitnesses. Do you know why I ask that question and I make that request? Because I don't want them to talk to each other. Because if they do, and I get there, there'll be one story told 4 times. No. I don't want one story told 4 times. I want 3 stories. They'll be told from 4 different witnesses. My job as the detective is to puzzle that back together. It's okay. That's the way reliable eyewitness testimony sounds. If I got there and they told me the same thing word for word, I'd know something was up. And if you had 4 Gospels that told you exactly the same thing about Jesus, you would know something. Do you think for a second that skeptics would be less inclined to argue about it if all the Gospels said word? No, they would say that's collusion. They would say you can't trust them. The fact that they don't line up, the fact that they don't agree entirely, is what makes them reliable. Earmark that I said, okay, at least we're beginning someplace like I begin in all my cases. I've got to figure out how each one of these is actually telling me the truth, but from some other perspective, either geographic or personal, that'll explain why there are variations. And if you do that as well, you'll see that those accounts are exactly what eyewitness accounts look like. So I had even increased confidence because the accounts didn't agree, and you should too. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to help them put a term on this, put a term on the kind of claim this is, because it'll help them, especially if they do research on this later. If you provoke them enough where they feel like, wow, I want to do some more research on that. Maybe that's a good point. And I'm going to do some research on that. Well, let's give them a term they could research, because the term, if it's researched, there's a lot of people who have written about this view of moral truth. And most of it exposes why it fails. So if you just knew what term to search for, you could actually find other sources, even more authoritative, or in that range of authority, that would help you to demonstrate why this is not true, why this is a false claim. So let's help them do that now. I'll give it to you on the screen, and then we'll talk it through. So here it is. Okay, this idea that moral truths are simply a matter of personal opinion, there's actually a term for that. That view is known as moral subjectivism. In other words, you are the subject, you're a subject that gets to decide if the truth is true, the claim is true. So you as a subject, rather than an object deciding it, you as the subject decide if it's true. That's why we call this moral subjectivism. So if individuals, subjects, are the source of all moral truth, why then shouldn't we, under moral subjectivism, just pursue our own selfish interests? I mean, if moral truth is rooted in the beliefs and opinions of subjects, why should anyone care about anyone other than themselves? Why should we look outside the single subject known as me for anything? Why should, I can see why I might want to care about myself, about my family, about my community, me, my. I can get that. But what would make a view wrong if all moral truths simply come from individuals to begin with? In other words, if I said, hey, I really like to kick dogs, and no one knows I'm kicking them because I always kick them outside the presence of their owners. And so when they come back, they don't even know that their dog is being kicked. But man, whenever I'm around a dog and there's no one else there, I kick it. Especially if it's a small dog. I love kicking small dogs. Really? Okay. We would say that's wrong. You shouldn't do that. But if no one knows you're doing it and it doesn't do any lasting harm, why would it be wrong? I mean, how would you ever talk me out of it? You're saying you don't like it? I would say, okay, I get it. You don't like it? Don't do it. I like it. I'm going to do it. Do you see the problem with this? In other words, you wouldn't be able to call out anyone who holds a contrary moral view if the validity of that moral view is grounded in individuals. The most you could say is, hey, I guess it's good for you. It's not good for me. You see the problem with that? How could you tell someone who holds a selfish view that he or she is wrong if our moral views are entirely selfish to begin with? In other words, they come from the self. Do you see the problem with that? If nothing else, you have no overarching standard, overarching way in which to adjudicate between views. How would you judge if two individuals hold different views about anything? How would you judge this? You might argue that the group gets to do this. That's another issue for another answer. But I want you to at least understand that the idea that moral subjectivism it'll get you to a claim, it'll get you to a view of truth. But the question we have, is it the overarching, objectively true view of truth? That's what we need to know. And it seems to me that's not going to be satisfied by that approach. All you're going to get is that you like it this way and somebody else likes it a different way. Do you see the problem with that? That clearly presents a problem. Now, all we're doing in this response is helping them to see that most of us know we grew up in sibling situations where two of us disagreed on something and then a parent stepped in and was the overarching authority that adjudicated between our two personal opinions, either sided with one of us over the other or presented a third option that we hadn't even thought of that made better sense altogether. Well, this is what we're looking for with moral truths. Is there ever an overarching authority that might be able to tell us what is really true? Or has everything just come from siblings who disagree? Can you imagine a world in which there was no overarching truth we could point to, which you could never make a case for anything because all truths reside in individuals? There would be no case makers because the case would sound something like, well, I like this better. That's be as far as the case would go. So clearly, we know we make cases for things. All of us do because we know truths aren't rooted in individuals. We don't create these truths. We discover them. And all we're doing with our case making is to try to point people to the most reasonable inference, the most reasonable discovery. Anyway, we'll take a break. We'll come back. And at the next section, I'll give you a third way to respond to this objection.
Be sure to visit the Cold Case Christianity website daily to read Jim's blog, watch the weekly video, or listen to the Cold Case Christianity podcast. You'll also find great free resources, including the free downloadable monthly Bible insert. While you're there, be sure to sign up for Jim's daily case notes email. Cold Case Christianity is designed to help you become a better Christian case maker.
You know, as I handle this objection, or I hear it being offered by people, this idea that that your personal opinion, that your personal view, that everything is perspectival, that even moral truths are a matter of perspective. When I hear that view, it really, to me, it makes me realize the power in our culture of subjective feelings over objective facts, right? It's often said that the facts don't care about your feelings. And I think this is usually highlighted in criminal trials. We see it all the time. I still continue to say that criminal courtrooms are the epistemological laboratory of America. Epistemology being simply how do we know what we know? And we determine this, and we experiment with theories about how we know what we know. We experiment with ideas about how to make arguments, how to use evidence to make cases, how to properly infer from evidence. We actually practice and experiment with these concepts in criminal courtrooms every day. It's in the criminal trials that we get to talk about how evidence is properly assembled, how to properly infer from evidence, what's reasonable, what's not reasonable, the difference between possible and reasonable. All these issues related to truth and how to determine it are the very things that we talk about all the time in criminal trials, which is why I used to love to be in criminal trials. And I was always happy to work cold cases because these are the ones that go to trial, right? Most cold case killers think they can get away with it all the way to the very end, and they don't confess, they go to trial. I might get somebody in a regular homicide, a fresh homicide, who will take a plea, right? Or confess to it. But not in these old cold cases. These cold cases, these are folks who go all the way to the trial. And that gives me a chance to experiment with how to put together cases. How we can convince groups of people that something is true, a jury. So what I want to do here is examine this difference between coming to truth emotionally or coming to truth on the basis of, there's lots of times when we are emotionally moved and we make decisions that maybe are not wise. Have you ever purchased a car because you just thought you looked good in it? You know, or you saw that thing go down the road and you're like, dang, I wish I had one of those. Young people drive those kinds of cars. Yeah, I know my hair is white, but maybe if I got in that car, I would feel younger. Maybe I'd look younger. I need a new Camaro. That's a very emotional response to how to buy a car. Instead, what I try to do is I go through all the research to figure out which car is going to cost me the least amount of headache going forward. Which car is the most reliable, the most trustworthy. I get it. Maybe I shouldn't be that way, but I try to buy cars rationally rather than emotionally, because I've seen friends who have bought the emotional car and had to turn it over in 5 years because it doesn't really run that well. Or they keep on getting pulled over, they're eating up a lot of gas, or whatever it may be. They had an emotional response that got them in the car, even though if they had used their head, they wouldn't have bought that car. Let's try to help people when they think about moral truth claims to see the danger in relying on our emotions. And that's what we try to do in this third response. Let's take a look at it on the screen. Okay. So you think that all moral truths are simply a matter of personal opinion. Okay, well, that view about the source rather of moral truth, where moral truths come from, that really elevates the role of personal feelings, if you think about it, right? You're saying that because I feel this is true, and at least to this, you know there's a danger in that. Even if you're somebody who likes to use facts, there's always the danger that you've only arrived at a conclusion, even a conclusion about moral truth, on the basis of personal feelings. Because if we all had to default to the facts, most of our, you have a better chance of aligning your view. But if it's going to be based on feelings, then we're going to have a wide variety of responses. Do you see how dangerous that is? Do you really think that's a good idea? Lots of people hold moral beliefs based on feelings, based on emotions, based on convenience, what they hope is true, what they wish was true, desires, his personal histories, rather than using careful reasoning. Do you really want to embrace these kinds of emotional reactions, using and giving them the same authority that you would give or use or accept with reasoned responses? Which would be more trustworthy, emotional reactions or reasoned responses? Should both be considered equally, valuable or equally valid? Look, feelings may follow from moral realities, I get that. But I think we've got to be careful not to allow feelings to dictate moral realities. These are not things that we create. These are things we discover. Can you see the danger in grounding moral truth in personal opinions? Now, in the first kinds of responses here, we talked about the self-refuting nature of the claim itself. But here, forget about all the forget about all that. Can you just see on its base that if we were all driving toward a conclusion based on a set of objective facts that are in the room, and doing our best, as we ask jurors to do, to suspend your feelings and your personal background, whatever, we get that, everyone's got those things going on in their head, but we ask you to suspend your biases long enough to be fair and be as analytical as you can about the most reasonable inference from the evidences. The same could be said of discovering moral truths. Yeah, I get it, that maybe you want to do that thing, that if it was just okay to do, but the question is there an objective truth about it? And we're far more likely to agree on those things if it's objectively grounded than we are if it's personally grounded, because man, I might have the same 10 pieces of evidence in the crime scene, but I got 12 different personalities on that jury. If I say, hey, based on your feelings, give me a verdict, I have 12 different possibilities. If I say, based on the best inference from these evidence, I think I got a much better chance at getting one verdict. And if we want to agree on some of the most foundational terms, we at least have to agree that they ought to be based not on your emotions, but on reasoning from facts. But those facts can't be flexible. They cannot come from you as a person. They have to exist before. You have to discover these things. You cannot create these things. Or we're back to the individualism that is so dangerous to begin with. So I want to help people to see there's a danger in that, even if we could overcome the other problems. That's why I give us your third response, right? And again, as you look at these responses and you're talking to your friends and family, you're going to have to decide how you respond, which of these three you use, or what combination of the three you might use. Anyway, I hope that helps you to at least get past the hurdle that then begins a conversation about what the objective source of moral truth might be if it's not the individual. And I hope that helps you think about this more clearly. We'll talk more about this in the upcoming weeks, and we'll answer another objection with a quick shot next week right here at Cold Case Christianity.
Thanks for joining us at the Cold Case Christianity broadcast. If you're interested in more information about this week's topic, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. For a thorough investigation of the reliability of the New Testament Gospels and the case for Christianity, be sure to purchase Cold Case Christianity, God's Crime Scene, Forensic Faith, and Alive.